You know that feeling, right? When just a single comment, maybe from a colleague or even a stranger online, somehow just gets under your skin and manages to color your entire day. It can really feel like we're powerless against it. But what if that feeling wasn't actually meant to last?
Let's just play with an interesting idea for a moment. What if any emotional reaction, especially something like anger, only had a natural lifespan of about 90 seconds? And what if everything that happens after that minute and a half was something else entirely?
You see, there's a biological reality to our emotions. They're not just these abstract thoughts floating around in our heads. They are actual physical events happening inside our bodies. And these events, well, they have a surprisingly short and predictable duration.
From a neurological perspective, when something triggers an emotional response, our bodies get flooded with stress chemicals. That rush of heat you feel, the jaw clenching, your heart starting to race, that's a chemical reaction. And the science suggests it takes about 90 seconds, just a minute and a half, for those chemicals to be naturally flushed out of our system. After that, the initial biological event is actually over. So it seems like there are really two parts to any emotional experience. First, there's that 90-second chemical event, the flush. And then there's the mental replay. The chemicals themselves fade, but we can keep that feeling going for minutes, hours, sometimes even days by re-triggering the response. And we do it by running the story over and over in our minds, replaying what happened, thinking about what we should have said. I love this metaphor because it illustrates the loop we get caught in so perfectly. The initial trigger, that's the burnt toast. The alarm goes off. That's your 90-second chemical flush. But instead of just letting the feeling pass, opening a window, we keep feeding the story. We're essentially just making more and more burnt toast and then wondering why that darned alarm won't stop ringing.
And this whole idea leads to a really common way we think about our emotions, that other people have some kind of direct control over them, that they can just reach in and push our buttons.
We've all heard this phrase. I'm pretty sure we've all said it too. It paints this picture of us as, well, kind of helpless, like other people are walking around with a remote control for our feelings. But this perspective might be overlooking where those buttons actually come from in the first place.
Here's an interesting way to reframe it. What if those buttons aren't external controls installed by other people? What if they're actually indicators of our own unhealed wounds, or maybe moments from our past when our core values were stepped on? It means they're connected to something already inside of us.
So when we feel that button being pushed, that flash of irritation or anger, instead of just reacting outwards, we could pause and ask this internal question. What is this really about? Maybe that sarcastic comment reminds you of a critical parent. Or maybe that feeling of being overlooked echoes a rejection from long ago. The other person isn't the source, they're just revealing the source. And that leads to another fascinating observation. Anger itself is often not the real, primary emotion. It's usually just the one that's most visible, and honestly, the one that feels safest to show.
You could think of anger as showing up to protect something else, something much more vulnerable. It's like the spokesperson or the tough-looking security guard at the gate that keeps everyone at a safe distance from what's really going on inside.
So what's it protecting? Well, often it's guarding feelings like hurt or fear or shame. These emotions can feel so raw, so exposed, that anger just steps right in. I mean, it feels more powerful to be angry than it does to feel hurt, doesn't it? It feels a lot safer to be furious than to admit you're afraid.
Let's use a real-world example. Say a partner forgets an important date. The angry response, the security guard, might be an accusation. You never remember anything. But underneath that anger is often a much more vulnerable truth. I felt forgotten, or I felt like I didn't matter. The anger creates distance, but expressing the hurt, that actually invites connection. So if our reactions are prolonged by our own thoughts, and our anger is often just masking something else, it all points to a really powerful realization. There's a moment of choice. This insight, famously observed by Viktor Frankl in the most unimaginable circumstances, suggests that no matter what happens to us, there's always this tiny moment before we react. It's a choice point. The trigger hits, the chemicals flood in, but before the words fly out of your mouth, there is a space. And accessing that space is all about connecting with what some people call the observer self. This is the part of your consciousness that can simply notice what's happening internally, like, anger is here, my heart rate is going up, without getting completely hijacked by it. It's the part of you that can watch the emotional weather without getting swept up in the storm. Now, this simple little linguistic shift
is a perfect example of how the observer self works. It creates this subtle but really profound distance. The thought is no longer an objective reality, it's just a mental event that you happen to be witnessing. And from that place of just watching, you can choose a totally different response.
Ultimately, this all leads us to one final, powerful idea. We aren't really experiencing reality directly. We are experiencing our story about reality. And that story is something we actually have the power to change.
This suggests a really interesting shift in perspective. What if that difficult person in your life isn't an obstacle to your peace of mind, but is instead a kind of personal trainer for your emotional fitness? What if their behavior, as challenging as it is showing you exactly where you still need to grow? Suddenly, a problem becomes an opportunity.
Just imagine you get a very brief, curt email from your boss. Story number 1, they don't respect me. The result, you feel anxious, defensive. Now story number 2, wow, they must really be in a hurry. The result, you feel understanding, maybe even some empathy. The email is exactly the same. The only thing that changed was the story you told yourself, and that changed your entire emotional world.
So it leaves us with a final thought to just sit with. If the feeling itself is brief, if the buttons are really our own, and if the story we tell is ours to write, who do you become when you realize that nothing and no one has the power to disturb your inner peace unless you give them that power?